As a Pokemon fan, playing any of your favorite entries in the franchise for the 17th time and still having as much fun as the second or third time usually relies on the enjoyment you get from that run's Pokemon team. The usual Staraptor, Luxray Floatzel or Pidgeot Gyarados Nidoking combo got boring, so you decided to try the next combo, and the next one, and the next, until it just doesn't feel the same anymore. Wait until the next gen Pokemon? Quite a while until that. Play a fan game? Doesn't have the same appeal. So, while turning with my woes to good old nostalgia, an answer popped out itself. Pokestar enemies, anime exclusive forms, manga nightmare fuel, humans that technically could count as Pokemon since they show up in a Pokemon battle? I don't know about that last one, but sign me up. I will be taking every notable non-Pokemon, or just a majority from my video about this topic, making them new sprites, and giving them battle data, and adding them themselves into Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green that you'll be able to play by the end of the video. But first, let's get our contenders by seeing the... Whether it's fish, cooked foods, costumes of animals, or those before mentioned iconic screenshots, the first cases of creatures that don't classify as Pokemon always lead to the Pokemon anime's early start being the culprit. While we do get experimental things like fusions or dreamt up variants of Pokemon later on, it's more than likely that animals appear solely for the reason of the Pokemon world still not being fully realized and an idea of how everything in its universe not being established compared to how it happens years later. So instead of babbling on about lame-ass regular animals that still existed as long as Fire Red Leaf Green, let's discuss some more unique looking cases. Randomly causing natural disasters or making drastic changes in the weather with Pokemon moves and no one having a problem with it seems to be the usual case in the Poke world. Sure, I guess you can get used to that, but has no one ever been concerned about Hellspawn or other entities appearing to make it a temporary 2v1 battle? Like, what are the implications? Does your Pokemon use its ghostly powers to summon something from the Shadow Realm? Does your attack energy coincidentally form into an imp-like form? Either way, other living things existing solely in the span of a single Pokemon move that don't have specific explanations like how it is with Dragapult or Vespiquen summoning bees seems interesting enough, while Slowbro just carrying around not Cloyster, Probopass having mini noses around it, or Substitute not really looking like any other Pokemon just sit in their own, not ghostly or ethereal, so here it goes, special corner. Actually, while we're talking about ghostly powers, did we ever learn what's the deal with the Pokemon Tower ghosts? I mean, we do see that they're just regular Pokemon spirits that are obstructed without the use of a Sylph Scope, but how come later in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, the ghosts have different looks, shapes compared to others? Yes, one is Marowak, and the other is for the usual ghastly Cubone encounters, but what if the stronger the Pokemon and its spirit becomes before passing, their soul takes on a different shape? We've rarely gotten to do stuff in the tower or any other graveyard setting, but in my eyes, they could try experimenting with this idea more in the future. Especially since they're still toying around with ghost stuff, like Yamask pretty much being a dead person, let's be honest, Spiritomb being a collection of souls, Basculegion being a soul vessel, and so on. Well, we've gotten to actually use those examples in battle ourselves, but Pokestar Studios, for the most part, only allows us to battle its cast of Pokemon Cast regions. While the canon explanation for all of them existing just boils down to CGI, green screen, mocap guy, or all three, the idea in general for a being that looks like the monster exists nonetheless. Same thing happening for a movie in an anime episode. So if Pokemon that were made by humans are an actual thing, them becoming living beings could be feasible. There are also similar instances of replicas made based on the rumor/myth Pokemon, but I think we've discussed the most noteworthy stuff from the games. 90% of weird special forms that appear in the anime, everyone probably already knows, but in case you don't, now you know. All that's left for special cases that are noteworthy mentions. Oh, that's less than I thought. Well, as seen in the episode Rise and Shine Starship, Celesteela seems to have a baby form. Does this mean that Ultra Beasts have baby forms, or is this exclusive only to Celesteela due to its bamboo shoot inspiration? Either way, at the end of the day, it's still just a baby Pokemon, aka the worst Pokemon category, so no one really cares. But I bet that someone somewhere probably called out manga just now. You can't prove otherwise. So let's respect this suggestion. Like how I hinted at in the intro with Haunter's sleep paralysis form, the manga has some out there special Pokemon itself. Either it's a talking Clefairy making fun of fans about believing that U3 exists, the source for Infinite Fusion's legendary bird fusion battle, or recycling the mentioned Haunter, it also has some weird little regular critters of its own, like a blob bug that you most likely have seen somewhere. I mean, it ain't as dope as a guy in a costume having Pokemon treatment, or literal mechas appearing in the TCG as playable cards, but at this point anything that appears in official Pokemon media, while not being a Pokemon itself, is more than enough to count. Well, was enough to count. That's it for the main points of non-Pokemon appearances. Now that we have collected quite a few contenders for an appearance in the non-Pokemon game, and probably will remember to add a few more later on, feel free to comment about that one weird looking Pokemon that you definitely saw that one weird time, while I begin the creation process. Since I'm lazy, like 90% of the time, checks out, the main idea is to just have all the Pokemon removed and replaced with a big enough batch of non-Pokemon only. And to sprinkle in some more slacking on top, I decided to try out the complete Fire Red upgrade made by these smooch-wivery goats, and also retooling a counting on your hands amount worth of sprites from the 64x64 DS sprite resource, just so I don't need to remake the basic bitches. Got all the basics? Good, cause it's time to lock in with making all the rest. Come home, munch on some stuff while watching YouTube, make multiple sprites, play Marvel Rivals, sleep, and repeat for multiple days until finishing the streak with the 75th one in the new decks. Yes, that's a man. His name is Imakuni. Yes, there's more where that came from. It's generally better if you don't ask questions in situations like this. Anyways, repeat the 75 sprite counter for the back, and icon for each official bootleg Pokemon to get the real total of 225. Would be more if I wouldn't have gotten lazy with not making shinies too, but it seemed easier to leave it for later, because that always works out perfectly. And you know, the lazy 90% of the time comment would be inaccurate then too. Priorities and whatnot. But with a vague idea for the lore of why there's no actual Pokemon here, being due to them disappearing one day, Alice in Borderland style, top Gs who know what that is have permission to comment, I guess it's time to take on every man's biggest struggle, putting it in. If Lil Bro only knew that him complaining about making sprites for multiple days a few minutes ago was bad, he actually was right. This was kind of easier. Well, except the time-consuming part of it still taking a long time due to the program being laggy and the amount of stuff I needed to add, edit, or change. But let me just show instead of showing and complaining. Complaining with benefits is on Patreon instead. Since this is technically the first time that I've decided to use Fire Red as a ROM hack base, at the start it took a moment for me to adjust to the small differences, like some slight script and command changes, sprites not having a second frame for animation, and so on. Though the best part was learning about the previously mentioned CFRU that gave me a major head start with moves, mechanics, creatures genetically built for merchandising, and abilities up to Gen 8, which gave more tools for fleshing out the non-Pokemon doofuses. One by one, I slowly inserted every sprite made and gave them stats, typings, abilities, shit no one cares about, move pools, TMHM compatibility each. Also, for a bit at the start, I implemented every icon with the smart option instead of cautious. That would nibble on my butt cheeks later without me knowing, but let's leave that problem for the future version of you that we'll see further in the video. At the same time, while I was putting in everything, I was also writing up a doc for the ROM that holds all the location, stat, and general info for the non-Pokemon. I usually prefer when ROMs have a document, so I'm just doing the same here. Oh saint me, oh so precious me. But eventually, as time passed with me fixing some random goofs with the sprites, putting in all the data and writing down the evolution levels with abilities and stats too in the doc, I realized that the worst part only starts now. Since there's no magic button that makes all the Pokemon disappear from the wild, I had to go through every location that has wild Pokemon and replace them with one or more from the new 75 list. That technically is lower since some are relegated to a legendary or one-time encounter role, until all the spots were covered. Alright, some time passes, not that bad. Oh wait, the same applies for all the trainers too. Well, might as well throw in some static encounters and other special stuff, only to waste more unintended hours, just because I picked the shit perfectionist straight at the start. But hey, at least in return I can put together pixels in a cool enough way. Sick. To catch a break, I decided to try reordering the regional decks with Hex Maniac Advance's dedicated tool, though that had some problems too, as there were more Pokemon in the game than the tool is usually used to. No problem, just went into the code and moved around the missing fellas' indexes, got them to pop up, and organized them based on the order I wrote them in the doc. Will they actually be in the correct dex order? Probably not, but you already know my 90% accuracy
Alright, I get it!
Instead, take some more statics and overall sprites as my peace offering. Here you go. But hey, now since that's done too, I can finally catch a Right, of course. Guys, remember these butt nibblers that I was talking about? The ironic smart option icons and the shiny sprites my lazy butt you imagined upon me saying, happens to the best of us, that I said would come back later. Yeah, they arrived a bit early, but let's just get it over with. Okay, so for no reason, the fraud that is the smart button says that it will shuffle around the new icon's colors to match the palette in the game while trying to keep it as close to the original as possible, right? Wrong! That's what I thought it did, but actually it's vice versa, reshuffling the game's palette to take on the new sprites from the new icon. So what if the colors are different? As long as it looks good and still works, it doesn't matter. I hear the voices in my head manifesting into script format say. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Until you realize that all the icons share the same few palettes, including all the new Pokemon between Gen 3 and 8 that came in the upgrade. That's how you get abominations like this at the end. Luckily, only the regular Pokemon I didn't plan to use anyways were the most affected, though I still needed to go through all of the icons I had already changed. and use the cautious option further on, since it did the thing I initially thought the smart button did. Nonetheless, there also was the problem of adding the shinies. Since I only added the regular sprites, the shiny sprites didn't have the new indexes, aka new order of colors used, hence looking more saturated than iPad kid brain rot. Cue some time going into replacing colors, reordering, and deciding how the shinies would look in the first place. The modern day man problems eventually get fixed. I mean, after finishing all the shinies, I realized that I don't know how to change the shiny rate in the new upgraded ROM, so let's just hope that it has the modern shiny odds, probably, and shove that problem under the carpet. And I guess we can put the replacing dex entries there too, like, who cares about those? Yeah, with those two issues now resolved too, all the main stuff is now implemented. So when thinking about how I could possibly justify being lazy enough to not do playtesting in the script, I realized I could get someone else to do it for me. 2 tweets and a few DMs later, I laid back and fixed any issues or bugs that popped up while I was struggling either with the Herculean task of adding very important game-defining changes, or ending a Marvel Rivals session with a worse rank than the one I had 2 hours ago when I started. You need to know this by this point. Priorities. But hey, you're watching a video about this process right now, so who's the real winner? I mean, let's be honest. But yeah, with a few good days, maybe even a week, of not contributing meaningfully to society and social life sacrifice, if I had something to sacrifice, the mediocre no story or plot change ROM hack that is Pokemon Uncanny version has been made, which holds a final total of 75. Let me step right in here, editing retro here, slight correction on the number. While playtesting, I got some feedback about the scarcity and blandness of encounters and battles with NPCs, so I took some suggestions and other randoms I remembered to get a nice round number of 100. Of course, that came with revisiting some routes, NPCs, and battles to give better teams, and new dock updates too, and of course some bugs, glitches as well, but let's not drag out the video any longer than it already is. So yes, now it's 100 non-Pokemon Pokemon. If you have watched some of my videos by this point, you probably would expect a tier list somewhere around this point. Which you would actually be wrong, it's actually here, try harder next time. But now that I have some actual new semi-official Pokemon to play with, it's time to go try some new runs of Fire Red and Leaf Green.
Later that same evening.
This pretty much is the exact same vibe as cooking food for an hour, only to eat it in less than 15 minutes. Oh well, at least I know my dear patrons and members that get special perks still got my back. Well, today people that like apples need to follow me on Twitter. That's, like, definitely a rule, don't question it. Either way, stay tuned for more, see y'all soon, and no, I didn't use anything while recording this video. Once again, stay tuned for more, see you soon, yeah. Bro, I'm off my rocker, Jesus Christ.